In these strange times of Donald Trump and conservative governments, Canada is often looked at as this shining light on the hill. But if you look just a little bit closer, it's clear that we're not as great as we may appear in the media. Because it's now even gotten to the point where Emmanuel Macron, a fellow neoliberal, is criticizing Justin Trudeau. The French government of Emmanuel Macron believes that Canada will have to show courage and give up the use of its fossil fuels in the name of the international commitment to fight against climate change. Now, when you have the French government criticizing the Canadian government, two neoliberal governments that probably should be complementing each other, then it shows you just how terrible Trudeau has been on fossil fuels. Now, American environmentalist and author Bill McKibben wrote a scathing piece earlier this year, criticizing Trudeau for his handling of environmental issues. Trudeau says all the right things, over and over. He's got no Scott Pruitts in his cabinet. Everyone who works for him says the right things, but those words are meaningless if you keep digging up more carbon and selling it to people to burn, and that's exactly what Trudeau is doing. He's hard at work pushing for new pipelines through Canada and the US to carry yet more oil out of Alberta's tar sands, which is one of the greatest climate disasters on the planet. And at times, Trudeau is almost boastful about it. Here he is at a Houston energy conference, which is really just a gathering of executives from the oil and gas industry, where he's talking about Canada's billions of barrels of oil.
No country would find 173 billion barrels of oil in the ground and just leave them there.
So like a typical politician, Trudeau just says whatever his audience wants to hear, even if that means spitting in the face of his own government's policies. Yes, 173 billion barrels is indeed the estimate for recoverable oil in the tar sands, so let's do some math. If Canada digs up that oil and sells it to people to burn, it will produce 30% of the carbon necessary to take us past the 1.5 degrees Celsius target that Canada helped set in Paris. And it doesn't end there. Earlier this year, the Trudeau government had tried to block an access to information request when the Auditor General tried looking into whether Canada was on track to phase out fossil fuel subsidies as they had promised. Green Party leader Elizabeth May said she was shocked when the government attempted to seal access to information related to his central Liberal promise on the climate change file. She said federal subsidies still amount to about $1 billion, which could be better spent on healthcare and infrastructure. A statement from Environmental Defense said Canadians should be alarmed that the federal government tried to withhold important information from the auditor, which leaves the public in the dark about the degree to which the government is subsidizing oil and gas companies. And they were trying to hide it for good reason, because Canadian oil subsidies are uniquely terrible. A report in The Guardian from October revealed that oil giants pay billions less in tax in Canada than abroad. So looking at the graph provided by The Guardian, you can see that Chevron Canada paid almost 3 times as much to Nigeria and almost 7 times as much to Indonesia as it did to Canada. And Suncor Energy Inc. also paid 6 times more in taxes to the UK, and Canadian Natural Resources Limited, or CNRL, paid almost 4 times more to the Ivory Coast. According to resource governance expert and UBC geography professor Philippe Leblanc, neoliberal policies in Canada and across OECD countries have resulted in lower taxes and royalties for companies. Justin Trudeau's Liberal government and the provinces continue to give $3.3 billion in yearly subsidies to fossil fuel producers in the country, despite having pledged to phase them out. But while all this is happening, the Liberal government remains as popular as ever. Quoting CBC News, with 39.6% in the CBC poll tracker, the Liberals are down a little less than 2 points from where they stood when Parliament returned from the summer break on September 18th. The Conservatives follow with 32%, up 1 point from the beginning of the sitting. Both of these scores are within 1/10 of a percentage point of where the two parties stood on election night in 2015. So while the Trudeau government is breaking their promise on fossil fuels, this hasn't touched their popularity at all. And that's because the media isn't really covering it. The media tends to cover whatever the three parties are squabbling about. And the Conservative Party also has many friends in the oil and gas industry. So they're not going to be complaining about this either. And in fact, there's a lot that's going on that's not getting the coverage it deserves, from Trudeau's broken promises to First Nations people, to breaking one of his key campaign promises for electoral reform, to selling weapons to Saudi Arabia. So the responsibility of getting these stories out there really falls on the shoulders of Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, which also haven't seen any gains in their popularity. Now, if they actually want to gain seats in the next election, it might be smart for them to actually begin discussing these sorts of progressive issues that voters care about. So if you want support, then fight for it.